Hi, we are live on YouTube, and three people already joined in. Here we go. Welcome to the Think Tank, where each day we share the news in open dialogue and discuss how it might affect the business world. We speak with different leaders on crisis navigation and management, as well as experts in professional and personal self betterment. It's meant to be a break, it's meant to be some learning time and the sharing of good news and ideas to start people moving forward. It's called the Think Tank. And so on screen today, right now, we have Kimball Anderson, who's there with Justin Spieth. Nice that you could be there. Kind of scared him. He's frozen there. Kimball is a creative executive producer who makes all the execs and individuals look amazing on stage, be on point, and have the right content to share with a little magic behind it. There is Robbie and L2. Robbie is with Thinkers Society. He designs unique experiences for your events that will help people start thinking better, be more innovative and creative. Thank you for joining, Robbie. Alberto Elizondo, photographer extraordinaire who specializes in sports. So it'll be interesting if he pitches in a little bit here today because he's obviously not busy shooting any sports, but maybe that'll change here quickly. And T. Scott Anderson has joined us. Scott is also a sports capturer, if you will, video and photo and film, famous for flying his cameras over fields and players, capturing that unique perspective. And finally, Dr. Paulus has jumped in here. Dr. Paulus is a psychologist and a dean and a professor and general know-all of creativity and innovation. He helps people get to their better ideas and start thinking more clearly, especially during these crazy times. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Paulus. I'm sure Doug will join us in a little bit as well. But that is our intros. We now normally jump in a little bit to the news where we kind of campfire roundtable any thoughts or things we've seen in the news. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
I just came across a Yahoo story from the financial people about the tsunami of bankruptcies going to happen in the retail industry, which is what Doug suggested already, right? They just took a massive impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother wave getting ready to happen after we kind of figure out the current waves, I think.
But bankruptcy is nothing new to Neiman Marcus, though.
Yeah. Carter Hawley Hale days. Yeah, that's true.
Robbie had an interesting post socially, which is interesting. We're building that into our kind of our curriculum of helping people present better virtually. And I will share that with you here as soon as I find my cursor. There it is. Standing by. This is so true and so needed. So I can't tell you how many times I've had someone walk in when I'm trying to talk to somebody, but having a little sign on the door is a fun thing to have there that you can mark and say, hey, there is something going on, because everyone is working from home now. And yes, there's tremendous amounts of leniency, of course, but not a bad idea to have a little sign like that. Anyone? 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 Bueller?
No.
Well, you know, it's a three-ring circus over here, honestly. I mean, it's between Christine and her. Literally, I'm not kidding. I think she's had back-to-back calls since like 8 o'clock this morning. So, you know, half the time Luke will get up in the morning and go in there not even knowing she's on a Zoom call. And thankfully, most people know who he is. But it's you know, it's an odd time, that's for sure. And obviously, the way we present ourselves. Not that I'm Mr. All Professional today at all, but look, the consistency that from which Alberto presents himself on a day-to-day basis is probably the way to go.
Dr. Paul has shared a bunch of stuff with me over the weekend, but one of these, kind of a downer, but very interesting, is that in these times of crisis and change, our stress increases 300%. How about that? Sorry about that. And with that, your conflicts, your confrontation will raise 81%. So probably back to our step one of how to deal in these times of getting yourself straight and then start looking around at your surroundings. I think that that's very true and apt here. Did you have anything else on that, Dr. P, that we should know or think about?
Well, as I've been in contact with you, someone from that company, leadership worth following, is going to be in touch with you.
Yep,
And
I've already been talking to them, so that should be
great.
good.
Yeah, he'll be talking about that, and then I sent you a link to someone, a CEO of a company who how she's doing with all of that. But it's a real amazing challenge for people who are, you know, for me it's easy because I'm in my own little company, but for the people like you and others who have major companies dealing with all these challenges, it's just you know, takes. I think it's unprecedented. The capacity you have to have, the ability, and the new creativity you have to keep things going.
And it looks like from a lot of the articles you were shooting over that, as you were saying, we're kind of game on as far as where our minds are at and what we're talking about together.
Yes.
And how we're doing that. I mean, I think this is, while this is all we can do right now, because that's our only option, I think some of this carries forward. And I think it's extremely valuable to have these kind of daily check-ins to see where people sit mentally and in whatever the process is you're working on.
So let's talk some sports.
Let's talk some sports. I'd like to welcome
Jordan behind you. What's going on?
Well, I told him, don't move. Whatever you stay there. He's willing to stay there. He's got nothing to do, so he said, I can stay here for 45 minutes.
So we invited and
go work on his study.
Yeah.
And John graciously accepted. We've got John Show with us here. Oh, and Frank Acciatuli's coming in from the outfield, and here he is morphing in right now. No, he's just going to be audio. Thanks for joining, Frank. Anyway, for those that don't know, John Show has been writing, reporting, communicating, managing, messaging for big brands, executives, athletes, and events for over 20 years. We know John from our years of content creating at the EDS, HP, AT&T, Byron Nelson, with Frank Acciatuli as our boss down up on the screen there. Thank you for joining, Frank. And it's always fun to be with John because John will have the most fun out of all of us, but he's always on point and just pulls out those nuggets of content in real time like we all aspire to do. So thank you for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me. Hey, big Frank. Frank will always hold. Yeah, I can't see him right now, but Frank will always hold a special place for me. Frank was the first person who ever took a shot on me when I launched my company. So,
wow.
Frank, hope everything's well, buddy. Thank you again.
He's on mute, probably.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, he'll come on in a minute. So, John, tell us, what does Show Sports Media mean and do? What is your day-to-day in a non-COVID world?
So I think, in a pre-COVID world, I'm not even sure non-COVID applies anymore, but pre-COVID, I work with athletes, sports events, companies, agencies, pretty much anybody who works or lives in the sports industry, and either help them build their brand through communications or help reimagine their brand through communications. So, a lot of earned media, a decent amount of social media, content creation, advising on media strategy, things like that.
And that's day to day as well as specifically around events, or is it just around events?
Every year is a little bit different. I mean, for example, today I should have been on a plane to Los Angeles to do one of 3 LPGA events over the course of 45 days. That's obviously not going to happen. I work a lot with sports marketing agencies that have companies who they help in sports. I was getting ready to start a new gig with the Pro Football Hall of Fame May 1st. It's now going to get pushed back because nobody's going to Hall of Fames. So, every year has kind of been a little bit familiar, but also a little bit different, it's been nice. I've been at it for 10 years and, there has not been one year really that's been the same.
All right. So, share a great war story, your best PR fiasco that you had to jump in and take care of.
I think there's non-disclosure agreements that keep me from providing the details. I will tell you this though, anything involving elected officials, I will never touch. Like I've done 2 or 3 projects that relied on elected officials to be either somewhat predictable or reasonable or competent human beings. And in all 3 cases, things went sideways for reasons that, a big part about communications is control, either controlling it or controlling the outcome of it, the response to things. If this one of 3 different things happen, and I have never, public policy, elected officials, even the employees, the public employees, they have their finger in the air checking to see which way the wind blows, and you can't control the weather.
Can't control the weather.
There's Frank. I know he loves dealing with politicians and regulations, right, Frank? Hey, buddy.
That's why we're in the problem we are now with the COVID process. The politicians helped produce this disaster related to it.
Yeah. Hey, John, a question. So apparently PGA resumes June out here at the Colonial, in fact, but with no gallery, right? With no gallery at all. So how do you see that going? Is that a good step, do you think?
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, if you read any of the stories about what you do, what events are going to have to do to get back to, let's just say, normal, so much testing, so much, the contact tracing, what you're going to have to do to put 10,000 people, 5,000 people into an arena or a building is insane at this point in history right now. I think golf has a unique ability in that it's outside. Like, you can't open up a football stadium and put people every 5th seat and space them out like that. Like you just can't, because the ingress and the egress of the fans, you just can't manage distance. I don't know how you would manage distancing through that. Golf, a lot of events don't have giant crowds, especially on the PGA Tour, the non-Tiger events. They could theoretically, if you've got 5,000 people out there over the course of a day, you could theoretically get 5,000 people onto a golf course and off of a golf course and keep them 6 feet apart. Sanitation stations and things like that throughout the golf course. I think that's a little bit more realistic to get restarted. The big problem now is that from an athlete standpoint, like what they're saying, if you look at what the NBA's not necessarily talked about, but the NBA's got 100 different options that they're looking at, is that all of the options generally revolve around the professional leagues taking their athletes and going somewhere and essentially quarantining them within some sort of fence that doesn't allow them out. So, because you can't control the variables of having people fly in from other countries. You can't have people fly in from New York to where I live in North Carolina to play in a sporting event. It just doesn't work right now. So, what you're going to have to do is, if you're going to take a full tour, PGA Tour field of 144 players, fly them all in. You have to put them in a hotel. You have to put their caddies in a hotel. You got to test them each morning before they go to the golf course. It's a level of detail that I don't know how logistically you can do. Because the problem is the first time somebody tests positive, just like the NBA, it shuts down. They're not going to let people play if there's one person positive running around a sporting event or a court or a field or anything. I thought what was interesting, I don't know, did you guys see the tennis stuff today?
No.
On Djokovic? So Djokovic came out and said he's an anti-vaxxer and said that he wouldn't take a vaccine.
Right.
You can't, and that's another part of this is, if and when there is a vaccine, and then it's going to be like, you're going to have an app on your phone that you're going to have to get scanned to walk into sporting events. Like that's the level of processing that they're talking about having to go through now. And that's
what they said. They've said that now. That's how they're going to do that.
Well, that's what they're doing in China. So
that's what I'd seen.
Yeah. So the kind of prevailing thought is, it was funny because when this whole thing happened, I said, my joke was that it was going to be the Lance Armstrong wristbands. Like we're all going to be walking around with either yellow ones or black ones. And that's how you're going to know. And, I still think that that's a reality. I think if this is all done on cell phones, I still think there's going to be some sort of visual representation of your current status so that, I know as somebody who's a 44-year-old healthy person, if I was walking down the street and, somebody had the yellow wristband on, I would take much more caution to get out of their way than I would if it was somebody that had a black one on. There's going to be, it's the crazy part about it is really movies are the only thing that we have to kind of explain what the next steps look like. I mean, none of this has happened in modern times. If I have to read one more story about the Spanish flu, I'm going to lose my mind. There's nothing applicable in 1918 from a societal standpoint to this moment in time. Like, we have millions upon millions of people living on top of each other. In 1918, your neighbor was like 15 miles away. Like that, it was a lot easier to social distance, and you had an economy that was more suited to shutting things down. You didn't have a cash-based economy really at that point. So,
what about the concept of throwing all the baseball players together in one town and going survivor style on that?
So the crazy part about it is, first, all of the economics of team sports are all based on collective bargaining agreements, right? So there's labor unions for every single league. All of those unions have negotiated pay scales, contracts, things like that to dictate, you can and can't do certain things. So with baseball, let's say all 30 teams, and this is where I think you're looking at more of a barnstorming thing in the short term than you are necessarily full teams, is if you've got, I don't know how many people there are on professional baseball, but you're not going to get 25 teams, full rosters, to sequester themselves away from their families. And when you have people who won't go, then it's affecting the pay of other people as well. So you've got to have a model where you say, the leagues and unions have to go back to the drawing board and say, listen, we're not going to sell tickets. We're not going to, we're maybe not going to take in the sponsorship revenue that we were going to take in. The media revenue will still be there, but it's the economics of sports change. So you're going to have to get players to make a concession about, I'll take an 80% pay cut to go play in a barnstorming league in Arizona. So, and then if you're a player, if you're an athlete, maybe you're 23 years old, maybe you're 27. I mean, you look at, there's some NFL players who've taken a year off in the last couple of years and come back just as strong. So, if you're, a moderately healthy, let's say you got some nagging groin issues and you have a chance to maybe take a year off and prolong your career another year on the back end of this, that might be something you look at. It's just, there's so many scenarios that, selfishly, as somebody sitting at home, we joked about this before we started. Like, I just want to watch something. Like, I'd take my kids. I wish if youth sports started back up, I'd be ecstatic with that, because I'd just be able to go out and watch my kids play sports again.
I was happy for MJ's documentary last night getting kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, they moved that up like 6 weeks or something like that, just because, the Tiger Show, that's 3 days, everybody was done with the Tiger Show. What's been crazy to me, and what I think was a huge, maybe not missed opportunity, but I don't really understand, is one thing that we're missing more than anything through all this, I think, and this comes as somebody who, I have a home office, I sit here all day long by myself with the dog, is the lack of community and kind of the shutdown of community. I mean, this right now is community. So what I think has been interesting is that the sports haven't done a fantastic job of trying to create community around the content that they've currently got. So, for example, Fox is airing Super Bowls every single Sunday. There's like 6 weeks of them. I think we're probably now in week 5. But you've got every Sunday there's a Super Bowl. Nobody's having Super Bowl parties, like either virtually or whatever. I missed the boat on this one. I grew up in New England, so I'm a huge Patriots fan. The first one that they showed was the Falcons Patriots 28-3 comeback game. And had I known that was going to be on, I would have dialed up all my buddies and we would have sat on a Zoom call and watched the entire Super Bowl together. But that's what I think is kind of the opportunity that people are missing around this now, and that doesn't exist, is you've got all these games that have happened forever. I think Augusta did a pretty good job. Augusta aired recorded events from past years that I sat there and watched every single night just because I missed Augusta. But where is the community aspect of that? There's not a lot of people who sit in their houses by themselves and watch sports, certainly some nights, but the concept of a sports bar is built around wanting to be, surrounded by people who are as passionate as you are about watching sports. And so we don't have that right now. It doesn't exist, and we'll have it again at some point in the future. Who knows how long it's going to be. But in the meantime, nobody's doing anything to build community around sports.
You know, I think,
Don't you
John, I think it's interesting, you know, talking about community around sports. I mean, Thursday, obviously the NFL draft, fantasy football. It's going to be interesting to see, first of all, if that's just a train wreck of the highest order from a technology standpoint. But the ticket, Sam, I don't know, or Kimball, whoever here in Dallas, I don't know if y'all heard the ticket talking this morning about, can you imagine being a fly on the wall? They're doing their mock draft today out at the Star, and you know, just the technology side of, you know, they made, to you being a Patriots fan, John, they made fun of Belichick, and you know, because it's all revolving around technology now for those guys. You open up. You know, you're going to have how many minutes? How many minutes is it in the first round? Is it 10 in between picks?
I think it's 12.
Is it? Yeah. So it's like in that 12 minutes in the war room, typically, obviously everybody's in a room and you've got the, you know, you got the scouts and but now it's supposed to be all virtual and just people you know, talking all over each other. It's just going to be an interesting dynamic to see. I went to the draft here in Dallas a couple of years ago with the boys, and man, it was so segregated with all these guys that were there with their fantasy football teams, right?
Definitely.
Hopefully, you know, it's fun. I mean, we're excited about it. We're big draft guys, but you know, hopefully Thursday, just like the MJ documentary, hopefully Thursday can, you know, infuse a little bit of sports into us.
I mean, people just want to watch something, you know. I mean, it's, you know, the joke I saw was, it was like, you know, 2019 Netflix and chill, 2020 like just get me out of my house. You know, and I just, the lack of live content. It's nice watching the recorded things, you know, some of the master stuff especially. Like I really enjoyed that because a lot of it had happened so long ago that I'd forgotten a lot of the details of some of those individual final rounds. But you know, I'd love to see, I said this day one, like if there's not going to be an NBA finals, then I want to watch, I don't want to just turn on NBA TV and watch game 6 of the 1997 NBA finals. I want to have 7 appointment viewing. I want to have 7 nights where Monday and Tuesday, it's game 1, game 2, off day, game 3, off day is Wednesday, game 3, Thursday, Friday, and kind of space it out like that. So it actually feels like you're watching an event instead of flipping on the TV to watch some old game that somebody's showing just to fill some airtime.
So do you think these little circus shows, the NBA horse competition, I didn't even tune into that. I don't know if anyone did, but I mean, do you think you got to do something, right? Because people are dying for some sort of content.
Well, it is funny in gambling. I mean, there's nothing to gamble on right now. You opened up this Pandora's box of legalized gambling in the United States, you know, whatever it's been now, 3-4 years, depending on some of the states. And I've got friends in my neighborhood who there's like this long hill and they were rolling balls down the hill 100 yards. And then the kids would chase after them and they were betting on which kid was going to pick the ball up. Like, I mean, gamblers and sports junkies, like you just need something. I don't think, you know, the NBA horse thing was not well received, but you know, I think if they had done it 4 months ago, they would have gotten absolutely trashed because it wasn't that good. But, you know, in today, it's just kind of like, well, they tried, you know, they put a few guys up there. They tried horse. It wasn't that great. But they tried and didn't really work. But, you know, there's other things we're going to see too. There's a plan in place where it's Tiger, Phil, Tom Brady, and maybe Peyton Manning to play a charity. You know, it's like a team-based event that they're trying to get on TV. So, you know, while it feels like I just feel like the last 5 weeks were doom and gloom, they kind of have been. But I think from a sports standpoint, as soon as things are loosened, you're going to have people come out of the woodwork. So like, you know, right now we're at mass gatherings of 10. Once they make mass gatherings of 50, then you're going to see more stuff out there. It's going to be more possibilities of getting stuff done. You know, I run professional golf tournaments and, you know, we look at it, especially in the LPGA, to me, there's an opportunity, like you don't get massive crowds. You don't have 50,000 people a day. So can you space them out on a golf course? Yeah, I think that there's some opportunity there to maybe come back. Golf definitely come back before traditional sports where you have to put butts in seats. You know, I mean, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but I think it was Fox Sports chairman came out and said that they've also talked about not pumping in crowd noise, but basically having like crowd noise, like you load like a laugh track on Seinfeld. And I think that's a real possibility if they end up announcing these games without crowds.
For the show, not for the players.
I actually, you know what? I didn't read it. If it was, I kind of wonder if it would be for the players, because they pump crowd noise in at practice all week long anyway in NFL games. So I don't know why they wouldn't be able to do it, pump that noise into a stadium. It'd be.
Yeah. Didn't that just recently happen where they had Tiger talk about his last, his 46-year or 43-year-old Masters win, and they took Jim Nance out and they put Tiger in, and he play-by-play commentary, but they still had the Nat sound behind it.
I sat there and watched that. I watched that entire round last year, and to be honest with you, I wasn't going to watch it this year. I kind of wish they'd picked a different round because that one was so new and was so fresh in my mind. I didn't really need to watch it again. But when I flipped it on and saw it was Tiger, Nance was interviewing Tiger, and Tiger was talking about his round, to me, that's creating something new and different and more viewable.
Did they do it with Nicholas for his?
They didn't do Nicholas, but Nicholas that aired like Wednesday night. But it was, to me, it was fun. I watched, my son's 11 years old. He and I watched the 86 back nine with Jack, and I was 11 years old. And I watched that with my dad. So my wife watched the 2005 Tiger chip behind 16 for the first time. And as she hates golf, and she sat there and watched most of the back nine with me. So, it's not, it's a good guide, Tim.
Well, it's interesting to your point. It's a time for new kinds of content, and you could perhaps bring different people in. I'll never forget. We were doing the FedEx Cup event at Eastlake with Coke in Atlanta, and it poured and poured and poured, so they wouldn't even let the Pro-Am happen. So everyone was freaking out because they had all these amazing players there, and everyone wanted to play, but they couldn't. But in the end, what they did is Mike Gretto did this. They pulled 5 or 6 of the Tigers and the Phils and the Fiji, what is it? Yeah, pulled them all in, and they had lunch with them, and it was just Q&A and and people were asking like we are here, what's going through your mind when you're on that hole, or whatever happened on this particular game that you played or match that you played. And that was fascinating. I think they ought to be maximizing that a little bit, because everyone in the end, whether it's fantasy or whether you're actually going to it, you want a little piece of their fame, of what their life's like.
It's happened on a small basis, but it's happening. So I sat through an exercise last week where one of my clients has got a bunch of NASCAR driver deals. And there's virtual racing going on, but there aren't real races. So you've got all these hospitality programs that are supposed to be taking place at track with driver visits, and those obviously aren't happening. So they've started putting together Zoom meetings with clients. So you can hop on and it'll be a Q&A session, just like you're saying, Sam, except not, physically next to each other. But you get to have Q&A sessions with the drivers, which has been, people think that's cool, especially when you're currently locked up in your house. The thing has been pretty awesome for my family. So I don't know anything about lacrosse. My son's a lacrosse junkie. I signed up for, there's a guy named Rob Pennell, who's one of the best attackmen in the country. He's a professional player. I signed my son up. It was like $8 a month for this app. And then once a month, he gets a piece of instruction, some other videos and things like that occasionally he'll look at it and go do drills in the driveway. So this thing opened up. Rob, 2 weeks ago, sent an email out to, whatever number of subscribers that he had. And he's now doing twice a week. So on Saturday mornings, he does film room. And on Wednesday afternoons, he does drills. And he opens up a Zoom room, and it's him, anywhere from 40 to 65 kids. And they're listening to him cut up game film and critique himself and critique other players he has guests on. They're doing backyard workouts where they're explaining to them, techniques and stuff that I don't understand. But it's a huge opportunity to connect with people, like you said, on a one-to-one basis. And it's just a matter of people doing it. Like I run a Charlotte Sports Plus business networking event where we get together once a month for either a happy hour or a speaker event. We usually get anywhere from like 80 to 120 people. We obviously can't do that. Starting last Thursday, we did our first Zoom webinar for people. We had Abe Madcore, who's the executive editor of Sports Business Journal, come on and just kind of talk us through what's in the minds of professional team owners, media companies, things like that. And we had 90 people attend that. So it's a different form of connection, but I think there's still the ability to do it. You just got to figure out, you don't even have to figure out that much. I mean, you just need to find something to talk about and get online. That's kind of the beautiful part to me of the technology side of this is it's as open to anybody that knows how to turn this thing on. And if you want to go to more than 100 people, you just got to pay $50 a month.
Yeah. Hey, question, John. You're a writer and a blogger as well, right? I mean, is that? I'm thinking this has turned you to your focus a little bit more in that direction. Is that right?
I write a monthly column for we have a community newspaper. It's like our town newspaper. And I write a monthly column in that called Modern Dad, where I basically just make jokes about my kids.
Oh,
So I do that. And then he's been doing a weekly newsletter. So I've been writing once a week just because, if I was working 50 hours a week before, I'm probably only working 30 now, maybe 25. So I just had some more free time, spending a lot more time with my kids than, normal. My daughter either abducted or found a baby duck egg last week. So we're now raising the baby duck egg as our own. We'll see how that goes. I read early on, somebody said that you should, I'm not a diary or a journal person, but that you should write about what's going on as you go through this. If for no other reason, then it'd be fascinating for your kids to read 20 years from now when they look back on this and they don't remember any of it because they're too young, just to kind of understand what was going on, what happened, and how everybody felt about the whole thing.
So we got an anonymous question here asking if we discuss the move of the Nelson to McKinney. And
yeah.
I don't know where that came from, but anyway, I don't know if you've heard, John. Have you heard? Of course you have. So we were out at. I never went out there. Did anyone go? Did anyone go out there?
I drove by and shook my head and left.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I just think I said this early on. Kimball, you and I might have talked about it. I don't understand why they ever tried to shove that location or that.
Frank might have a thought on that. What about it, Frank?
I mean, it's crazy.
Frank, we're not hearing you. If you click on the little microphone on the bottom left of your screen there.
No, there's a mute. So the volume level's the slider's not loud enough on his output on the mic. You'd have to go into the settings for Zoom.
Yeah, if you click on that microphone though, you can go adjust that.
Okay, click on the mic. It should be a settings.
No. So anyway, John, in case you didn't know, they had us there at this place south of Dallas for a while, which apparently was a nice course, but there was no support around it at all. I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere.
No restaurants, no hotels. It's a landfill out in the country.
And no trees. So as you know, it's hot here. So people were getting smoked. And then
now it's going to McKinney, the TPC Craig Ranch. I don't know much about that. Does anybody know? Frank does, but we just can't hear him.
We got to get Frank on.
Yeah, Frankie, we want to hear you.
Can't hear you. We can give Frank a phone number, I think.
Do you know anything about it?
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah, we hear Scotty.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about an intermediate step before allowing fans back out on the course or in the stadium? What about?
Oh, now we hear you, Frank.
Now we hear him. Good.
Damn it.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, good.
Hey,
good.
So let me give you all the background. So number one, the move to Trinity Forest was forced on the Salesmanship Club by the city of Dallas and AT&T. So they decided they were going to help South Dallas. They put they built that golf course, and it's a link-style golf course, and it precedes a major. So there isn't a damn golfer in the world that wants to play a links course the next week. So that was strike number one. Strike number two, as Sam has said, it was built on a landfill. Right before that tournament, they were running Hummers over the landfill to get rid of the methane gas. So the place is a dump. Number three, no infrastructure, as you guys have mentioned, no hotels. So the city owns the Omni Hotel downtown. That's where most of the golfers stayed, or the Adolphus. That was completely a kludge. You got to remember the Four Seasons. The golfers loved the hotel, and the wives are very happy. Unfortunately, they hated the golf course. So anyway, they go down to Trinity Forest. You got to park at Fair Park, which is in the hood. No offense to the hood, but people don't like it. They had to get bussed over. There was no main entrance to the golf course. You had to cross a fairway to get to any of the facilities. It was hot as hell. And for 3 years, they built infrastructure to try to take care of that. Nobody came. They had a pavilion at the Four Seasons, that's where most of the revenue came from. Lots of beer, lots of booze, lots of broads. Guess what? Nobody's going to hang out in South Dallas at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that was a bust. So with all of those things, plus we had horrific weather. So the PGA Tour supposedly has now told the Salesmanship Club, we want you to move the tournament. So they get into negotiations with a bunch of golf courses here in Dallas. The final two were the Four Seasons and this Craig Ranch at McKinney. Four Seasons, everybody knows about that facility. John, you've been there. Sam, you guys worked that event. Great facility for entertainment and great for hospitality venues. I mean, they had that thing down after all those years being there. McKinney, Craig Ranch, put together a hell of an offer that the Salesmanship couldn't refuse, with the thought in mind that the players are going to like the golf course in McKinney better than they're going to like the golf course at the Four Seasons. Unfortunately, and John was on the we have a radio station in town here called The Ticket. So he was on there last week, and they were asking him a bunch of questions, Norm Hitchkiss and whoever the guy is that runs that show at 11 o'clock in the morning. And John was dancing on his toes, and I had a conversation with him after the interview. So number one, McKinney is, 25 miles from downtown Dallas, and it's probably 35 or 40 miles from Fort Worth. So yes, there's a big population up there, but I'm not sure that you're going to draw the crowds that you used to get from Dallas and Fort Worth. There was a crossover there. And the Four Seasons was smack dab in the middle of it. Okay. The golf course at McKinney is very nice. I've been there. I was there when the Salesmanship Club ran an event. I think it was on the Nike Tour or whatever the hell the Corn Ferry Tour was called back in 2006 or maybe 2008. However, I digress. The golf course has got a bunch of creeks. It's got a bunch of bridges. And guess what, man? Yes, it's a TPC course, but in terms of spectators, it's going to be a bear to move people around on that golf course. That's first problem. Second problem is parking was all on these vacant lots. Well, guess what? With all the development in that area, there are no more vacant lots. So I have no idea where they're going to park these cars. Okay. So crowds, transportation, it's parking, better situation with regard to hospitality setups. However, it ain't TPC in Las Colinas. There are still issues in McKinney. They have a beautiful clubhouse. Now, hotels, I have no idea where the golfers are going to stay. There are a bunch of motels in the area, and maybe one halfway decent hotel. So that's another issue. If golfers going to stay in downtown Dallas or at the Four Seasons and then truck themselves out to McKinney, I have no clue.
Yeah, hey Frank, there's also, I know Omni's announced, I don't know what is going to happen because of what we're going through right now, but Omni is building another hotel up there.
Well, they're not going to have the tournament until 2021, so maybe there's enough time. And they're now in June, right before the players, I think. So they ought to get, they should have a decent field because of, you guys, everybody on the call knows that the Nelson has gone down with regard to the top 10 or top 20 or top 30 players that play the event. Hopefully, because of their scheduling now, they'll get a better field. Colonial's going to be the first one up this year. Yeah.
The interesting thing or kind of question back for John as well is, what are you going to do for all these events? Are they, like we just heard today, this one event that was happening 2 months ahead for us? isn't getting postponed. It just basically got canceled to the next year. So they're not going to have to try and figure out when to shoehorn that in. And all these sporting events, are they going to try and make this stuff up? Or are they just going to say, screw it, it's a wash for this year and just go back to your regular timing and schedules and all that stuff? When you look at the NBA and all, you know, if football, if that gets impacted, or baseball, what do you think is going to happen? What are people talking about?
You can jump on that, John. From a golf perspective, I think that everything is just going to get whatever's canceled is canceled, and we're gonna start from the Colonial and work on. Yes, there were things that were rearranged this year, like Masters going in November, which ought to be interesting, by the way, because November in Augusta is not the warmest month of the year. I don't know what are they going to do about Azaleas, John.
Yeah.
No Azaleas unless they're painting them on this year. They look beautiful.
I guess. Well, yeah, it's gorgeous. Unfortunately, the place is vacant. I can't talk to the NBA or NFL or anything else. I guess, do I miss sports? I do, but I guess I've been watching a lot of Netflix and Prime Video. I haven't, you know, I've been playing. Fortunately, I'm able to play golf here. They haven't shut the golf course, all of them down, so I'm playing at least once or twice a week now. So it keeps me sane.
Nice,
but NFL. Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
No, I said that's great. You're playing.
Thank you. I'm still alive too. That's another good thing.
So to your point, Frank, the PGA did schedule, I think, is it Hilton Head after the Colonial, and then Travelers after Hilton Head. So they've kind of moved some things around to try to get some momentum, it looks like.
Yeah. John, I don't know about this safe distancing thing on a golf course. You've been at golf tournaments before. How the hell are you going to enforce that?
Well,
people are just they're herds. I'm sorry, they are. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you'd have to do it. First, like with the scheduling stuff. I mean, we're all kicking the can down the road. Like that's the PGA Tour. Everybody can tell you that, you know, their plan is this, that, and the other. And then the reality, everyone in this business is doing is kicking the can down the road in the hopes that things get better before you have to make a decision. Because right now the decision is cancel, period. Like there is no option B. There's no options to look at. It's if your event is in a current window where you need to start building, then at this point your event's canceled. So as we kick the can down the road on all these, you know, Augusta has no idea what the world's going to look like November 9th through the 15th of 2020. You know, so it's really just, and then to be honest with you, within an event, it's also going to be, you know, can you have a pro-am? If you don't have a pro-am, then events largely aren't financially viable. Like you have to have a pro-am, and you have to have a pro-am go off with a full field in order for an event to make money. So, you know, if you've got events that maybe, you know, some events save a lot of money and they've got enough to pay staff or some portion of staff for a year with a missed event. A lot of events don't. So I think, you know, you're going to see companies that run events that go away. I mean, you can't afford to run an event for 2 years without $1 of revenue. It just doesn't happen. So, you know, much like everything else that we're seeing is, you know, no event, you know, that might not be back next year, at least under that management of the company. The sponsors might not be back. I mean, you look at, you know, I'm not going to pull a specific one out of the hat right now, but, you know, there's a lot of companies that are hurting, and you might not be able to meet sponsorship commitments come, you know, early 2021, 2020. So there's so many questions on it right now.
What is their commitment during this? So like all the sponsors for a major tournament right now, and the tournament gets pushed or postponed.
Well, I mean, so there's a couple ways you can do it. Is, you know, you can defer payment until next year. So you basically keep them under contract for an additional year. You just roll all the dollars forward to next year. Then obviously you have to figure out a way to pay people that work for you. You can hold them to the fire, which every single sponsorship contract has what's called a force majeure clause in it, which is an act of God. So, you know, if there's a hurricane in the middle of the golf tournament and the tournament has to get canceled, you still have to pay your bill. Now, if you hold all of your sponsors to their force majeure clauses, then you will have no sponsors come 2021 when everything gets back to normal. So, you know, it's really kind of a delicate balance of how do you explain to some of these companies, you know, we need to run, we need to operate, we need to keep people on in order to run this event in the future. But also we understand that we're not meeting we're necessarily meeting our fulfillment to you because of cancellations. It's, you know, it's just like everything else right now, right? Like if you're gonna allow tenants not to pay rent, then it gets kicked up the chain to the banks at some point or to the government, more likely, and that's reckoning day there.
Any other last questions for John that anyone would like to ask?
Is there going to be a college football season?
Yeah, what's going to happen there?
The bigger impact about college is so tough. I mean, the NFL, you could theoretically get 32 owners on the same page underneath a commissioner to stage an NFL game, potentially without fans, maybe with, some reduction of fans in the stands. College, the problem with college is that there's even with the NCAA, there's no governance. So, half of the colleges in the SEC might decide to come back. The other half might not. You're under contract. If you're in the, let's say you're in the Big East and you're under contract to play, or you're in the SEC, you're under contract to play a team in the Big East, which means you got to go to the Northeast. Like, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of people that want to do that right now. So I don't see how college football gets organized enough to have a full season across the country. A lot of could change between now and September, but the bigger problem is, you got to have students. So if you're going to have football, then you got to have 20,000 students on campus, or however many kids are on your campus. And if you read a lot of the stuff about colleges right now, they don't feel too confident about the fact that they're going to get 15,000 kids in dorms come middle
Robbie,
of August.
what's your inside take on this with Logan? Robbie?
I mean, I think exactly what John is saying. I mean, and John, I think, would agree to this too. You can say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen by September, but as everyone's well aware, that the season has to start well before that for the athletes. And, if there's no students on campus, and the campus, are the employees back on campus, and, all of the other variables that go into those kids being able to get back into the facilities, and get the proper training ahead of September to get ready for the season. I mean, you're right. There's a million different variables there.
And so what's Logan's?
I'll tell you this real quick. Logan's throwing coach I spoke with the other day, and I said, what are you hearing? And he said that he spoke with the offensive coordinator at the University of Texas last week, who's a buddy of his. And he said, man, we just don't know. They have there's no insight at all. Some schools are coming up with disaster, contingency plans. But at the end of the day, as we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago, to John's point, if you're Texas and Texas is starting, Texas is, loosening up, and, we don't have as many cases or what have you, and you've got a second week game against LSU, and Louisiana is still in a bad spot. Are you going to Louisiana for that game? It's not fair if they haven't had the opportunity to prepare at the same amount of time that, Texas has.
Yeah. I think in the bigger, far more concerning thing as it relates to college sports is all of college sports are funded by basketball and football. So you've already canceled March Madness. So that money has not come back to the schools in full percentages. And now if you don't have college football, most of the winter and spring sports are paid for by football. So if you don't have, the $80 million in revenue that your football program is bringing in, then guess what you don't have the ability to pay for? Baseball, track, these other sports that are funded by football. You have to have football in order for your school to be able to function economically, or at least from a big Division I standpoint. So that to me is the much larger thing at play is if you don't have football, what happens to college sports?
Well, and you also have the unknown line item of gifting, right? Because nobody tracks. The NCAA has hidden figures on gifting, but it's sort of the unknown. And right now, most major college programs, their gifting has gone to zero.
Well, and that's the thing too, and this is why, if I had to crystal ball it, I don't think we're going to see 32 NFL teams. I don't think we're going to see 30 NBA teams. What I think is maybe it'll be something to kind of get you through. It'll be a barnstorming type situation. The one thing that, again, I know lacrosse just because my kid plays it. I think one league that's got another pretty interesting opportunity is the professional or Premier Lacrosse League. So it's a barnstorming league. They have 7 or 8 teams. They pack up and they go to different cities every single weekend, and they play maybe a 15-game schedule or 15-week schedule. To me, they're already doing to some degree what is being asked. They've got all the players in one hotel. You know, if you put them in one city, if you kept them in one stadium, they don't draw a huge crowd. So it's not like ticket revenue is largely driving anything. It's mostly a television media property. So a league like that, I think, has the ability to come back much bigger and pretty strong right out of the box, just because it's already set up to kind of be played how they're talking about playing sports. Again, it's the same thing with golf. I know, Frank, you mentioned this, but the LPGA especially, I mean, you don't have 50,000 people out there. So I think there's ways to get people in and out of there, you know, not necessarily process them. I don't know if you're going to have a main gate where you've got ticket takers and, you know, wanderers and all. I don't know if you're doing all that, but if it's an open golf course situation, almost like a US amateur, or used to be, where you can walk on, watch golf, make sure people are being responsible about how far away they are. Maybe I've talked myself into that, but I feel like that could be an option in the short term.
Yeah, who knows what sport pops up now? I mean, maybe it's esports, maybe it's the virtual F1. All of a sudden, just takes over because it's a wide open opportunity for someone to take over. Everyone's dying for any sort of competitive content.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the marble racing in England, like you can actually gamble on marble racing.
Yeah,
crazy. But that's, you know, that iRacing, the NASCAR iRacing stuff was perfectly, I mean, it was set up so perfectly for this that it worked out well for NASCAR. But, you know, it's realistic looking, you know, ish. You watch it and it's guys that are racing. They're getting mad. They're getting in fights, you know, Twitter wars. It's kind of like the old days of NASCAR without the ability to add, you know, fists to the equation. But, you know, I think that some of that stuff is just, it's just so perfectly suited to what we're now stuck doing, that it gives people something to watch.
I mean, couldn't the PGA do something similar to NASCAR?
They could. I think the unique part about NASCAR is that all of these guys are already in the simulators. So, like, let's say tomorrow you want to have, you know, Tiger, Phil, Jack, 3 other people, whatever, have some sort of, you know, like a golf tournament on a Xbox or PlayStation. The problem is a lot of them, you have to teach them how to play video games. Like a lot of them don't play video games. A lot of them are
everybody plays Golden Tee, man.
Right.
That would be fun to have have really good gamers play with the pros who aren't that good, that know the fundamentals but can't get a joystick to do it. That would be good fun to watch.
When they've been NBA 2K, they've been doing a bunch of that because a lot of NBA players are video gamers, so it's been pretty easy to get them on NBA 2K playing against each other. It hasn't been the most exciting thing.
No, it's been bone dry having 2 guys sit in their chair and just sort of, unless the guys are animated and they're fun anyway. But
and that's why kind of the iRacing thing has worked so well, is just because, you know, they've already been doing this. Like William Byron, who drives it's the number 24 Exalta car. William Byron got his break in NASCAR because of iRacing. He came up through iRacing. He didn't race on a track until he got his big break in NASCAR. So, and then you've got a lot of these guys that they'll practice on those racing simulators at tracks before they go to them, because practice is now limited at tracks. So that was an ideal situation that was perfectly suited for them to kind of just very quickly transfer from reality to virtual. And you can do paint schemes. I mean, you're still getting sponsor commitments that you're reaching, or that you're fulfilling. So, you know, that one was so unique and so perfect that it's kind of hard to draw comparisons outside or to other sports, just because, hey, that one was just.
Hey, Mike Toman, what's up? You got something?
Hey, I was going to ask, how is anybody thinking that it's going to be covered when it does come back? I mean, the wide shot without any people in the stands is not the same as, you know, has anyone thought about, you know, is it going to be all like shooting the Cleveland Browns on a Saturday? Just focus on the team, focus on the field only, don't show anybody else.
Do the whole thing with Skycam from right above it.
Yeah, Scott's got a job.
Yeah.
When we did the Olympics in China, you know, that was not well attended by foreigners. So even though they built these massive stadiums, they had all the cameras set that they were shooting down so you could never see past 5 or 6 rows. So it always looked like it was swamp full of people, and it was empty. So that's probably what happens. All right, John. Well, thanks so much for joining. I think we had some good discussion, and it'll be interesting to see where we go with this. We invite you to come back anytime, every day at 2:00, and on Fridays at 4 we have a happy hour. And it's every day it's someone different or a different topic. This week we've got some other leaders that are possibly going to join. So tune back in. So